Mercedes-Benz is most famous for its luxury, and McLaren most famous for its performance. Now, what do you get when you blend in the best of both worlds into one supercar? You get the SLR McLaren. Hey guys, and welcome back to another episode of Imperial Diecast. Today I want to review what is by far my favorite Mercedes supercar of all time, the SLR McLaren. Ever since I first saw the promotional pictures of the supercar when it debuted as the Vision SLR, I was hooked. Especially in this color, which is known as Crystal Laurite Silver. SLR stands for Sport Light Racing. This supercar was produced from 2003 to 2010, and apart from the Veyron, was one of the few cars at the time that blended in luxury with performance like no other Grand Tourer, while at the same time sporting a timeless design. I mean, you have to understand this car is so good, it could almost go toe-to-toe with the Ferrari Enzo and Porsche Carrera GT back in the day, coming in a close third. Today, an AMG GT simply cannot compete with flagships like the LaFerrari or the 918. This is not the first SLR I have reviewed on my channel. About a year ago, I reviewed the 124 version by Motormax, which was one of the first diecast cars I purchased when I started collecting in late 2015. But even back in the day, when I had little to no experience in collecting, I had already realized that the Motormax SLR was not up to par even for 124 standards, especially when compared to the quality on offer by other companies like Welly, which is why I ended up repurchasing the SLR after I expanded into 118. There are several options in 118s, starting with this Maisto retailing for 35 to 45 euros with box or lower without box. Maisto also made this car in blue, in black, and in an anthracite dark gray metallic sort of color. There's a huge 1/12th scale Motormax version around the 100 euro mark for those interested in bigger scales. But returning to 118, there's the GT Spirit SLR, which you can find for less than 100 euros, but it's the 722 GT and it's sealed resin. Then there's the fully opening Mini Champs version around the 130 euro mark, but it's a roadster. There's of course the CMC, which, if you're lucky, you can find for under 500. And finally, there's the recently released Frontiart, which comes in two versions, the sealed one going for $270, and the fully opening Frontiart upwards of $800. But today, I want to show you what you can get for $40. Now, I actually got this for $23.50 without box. The only problem is that the windshield had several scratches the seller hadn't informed me of. So I wrote to him and I got a small discount. I had to clean the rest of the car as well, but I think now it looks just like new. Silberpfeil, or Silver Arrow, is a nickname given for some of the vintage Mercedes track cars, but I feel like the name fits for the SLR as well, especially when you look at the front of the vehicle, which is shaped like an arrowhead. So looking at the front of the SLR, you can see that there's a lot of detail on display here. The biggest improvement that I noticed to the 124 scale Motormax version is that on this 118 Maisto, the headlights look a lot better. These bi-xenon bulbs are made out of chrome, and if you look at the headlight covers, they also have these vertical lines on them, just like on the real car. The 118 Maisto also has pegs in the middle, however, they are not as noticeable as on the 124 Motormax. The Benz star in the middle is a separate three-dimensional piece, and it's made out of chrome. As we move further down, you can see that we have these fog lights on either side, and the center grille is also quite big. We have a turn signal up here, and even though it has a peg, unlike the 124 scale Motormax, it's a separate piece and even has a little texture on it. Now, unlike on both the SLS and the AMG GT, which open in a normal, boring fashion, the hood on the SLR opens this way, which is quite cool. However, something to note here is that if you open the doors first, then the hood gets stuck. Funny enough, this is also the case on the real SLR, which is why the engineers made the hood slide forward before opening up. And that mechanism is missing on the Maisto, but replicated on the CMC version, in the sense that it sort of lifts up and then slides forward a bit and only then opens up the way I opened it up right now. And of course, all supported by a realistic and delicate hinge mechanism, rather than those two dog-leg hinges like you see on this Maisto. However, what is really nice is that even on this Maisto, we actually have a really nice looking heat shielding installed underneath the hood. And there was no reason for Maisto to do this, but they went with it, so that's really cool. And you can see the texture there. It's done really nicely. And the hood liner is also painted in black, so there's a little bit of extra detail there. But now let's take a look at the engine. So what you're looking at here is a supercharged 5.4 liter V8 producing 617 horsepower at 6,500 RPM. 0 to 100 kilometers per hour can be achieved in less than 3.8 seconds. And the SLR has a top speed of 334 kilometers per hour, or 208 miles per hour. These are stats that neither of its successors could achieve. I feel like Maisto did a pretty solid job on this engine. I mean, CMC is world famous for its engines, but the only real extra details that you would get on the $600 CMC would be engine depth, extra wiring, as you can see in this picture, a slightly different color on the engine blocks in that they are like an anthracite color instead of black, and of course the aforementioned hinge mechanism and proper opening of the hood. But the reason why I'm giving all this praise is because you can see that Maisto, for example, went all the way and painted these individual rivets in silver to make them look like those on the real car's engine. Maisto also put the warning label right here, which is barely visible underneath the Mercedes-Benz star. And that panel right there on the front gives you information on who installed the engine on the real car. And here's a look at the car's elegant side profile, which I still think looks so much better than that of the SLS or the AMG GT. You see that little square right next to the door? That's the door handle, and this is how it works. Being a 118 Maisto, this car comes with suspension. The Mercedes SLR McLaren already came with turn signals integrated into the car's side mirrors, but this being a Maisto, there's no separate transparent plastic here built into the mirror, and instead we only get a slightly different texture. Just like the mirrors, the side scoops are also made out of plastic, but they are perforated, which is really nice. On the 124 scale Motormax, I actually had to paint this in black to give the impression of perforation. But here on the Maisto, there's no need for me to do that. You can see at the top we have the McLaren badge, and I blacked out the exhausts of this car, which are also on the side, which is pretty cool. One of my big disappointments with the 124 McLaren SLR by Motormax was that the wheels were lacking details. There were no Mercedes logos in the center, the rubber quality of the tire walls was also quite bad, and that together with the bluish milky tinge of the windshields and the poor headlight detail, was what convinced me to repurchase the SLR McLaren in a bigger scale, something I usually don't do. So here's a closer look at the car's rims, and I think they're done really nicely. These are supposed to represent 19-inch forged aluminum asymmetric turbine alloys. Just to put the price of these in perspective, a set of 4 for the real car costs $20,000. So on this 118 Maisto, you can see that we have the individual 5 lug nuts around the center, and they have like a depth around them as well. They're done really nicely. And of course, in the middle you have the Mercedes-Benz star. But you know what's really freaking amazing? The trim around the star actually reads Mercedes-Benz. Let's see if my camera can pick that up. I mean, this is crazy. This is a Maisto, but we have details here that go into the sub-millimeter level. Behind the rims, we have ceramic composite brakes. And for some reason, Maisto painted them in black instead of the usual silver. But the brake calipers are silver, and of course the caliper stays in place. And the brake disc does as well. So that's typical Maisto for you. What I really like about this Maisto is that the tire walls actually have a branding on them. You can see that this car runs on Michelin's. It's got the Michelin Pilot Sports, measuring 245/35 in the front and 295/30 in the rear. Maisto has faithfully replicated this with the rear tires being wider than the front ones, as you can see right here. And here's a look at the back of the SLR McLaren. You can see that we have the Mercedes-Benz star in the middle, the brake light painted in red on top of it, and that spoiler that it sits on sadly does not lift up. But of course on the CMC version it does. The spoiler on Maisto's SLS, however, does come up, which is in fact something even the Mini Champs lacks. Probably the only area where the 124 Motormax is better than this 118 Maisto is that these lights here don't have pegs. And regarding the taillights, I think that they are done very nicely on this Maisto. The only thing that I don't like about it is that they have pegs in them. However, the pegs are on the side and not smack dead in the middle. So if you're looking at the back of the car, like directly at the back, they are visible. So even though these taillights have pegs in them, what I still like is the unique texture that they have, as well as the dual silver DRL strips inside. And especially under the flash, I think they look really nice. The trunk opens, although there's not a whole lot of space inside. But let's see what we can fit in here. I've got my Mercedes-Benz luggage right here. And that's about it. And now let's get these doors open, because that's what we've been waiting for. And despite the age of this model, they still stay open, which is great. And these are not gullwing doors, they are butterfly doors. Now let's take a look at the interior. So perhaps we're going to begin with the SLR branding on the door sills. And now taking a look at the luxurious interior of the SLR McLaren. You can see that this is an all-grey interior. Both the silver and the black versions come with this all-grey interior, while the blue and anthracite versions come with a two-tone black and red interior that is painted differently, as you can see in this picture. But anyway, returning to this one, let's first admire the brushed aluminum center console right there in the middle. I have to admit, the air vents on this SLR McLaren could have been done better because they don't have any shading. It's just silver paint. However, what I like is that if you look at the middle of the center console, you can see that the SLR branding is actually photo etched or like slightly raised. And hidden behind that SLR middle plate is the AM/FM radio and cassette player on the real car. Further below, you have your dual zone climate controls, a dial for each side, and your fan speed can be set in the middle. And with the dials above the SLR logo, you can adjust the suspension and shifting on the real car. Now, even though the SLR McLaren used to be a $550,000 supercar, it still was a car from the 2000s, and therefore had no smart key system. Maisto actually went all the way and put the ignition key lock right there next to the steering wheel, and painted the keyhole as well. Remember, this is a budget model, not a CMC. Very amazing. The seatbelt latches are painted red. You can see the handbrake right next to it, along with the 5-speed automatic. And here's a look at the seats. The center armrests actually have storage compartments. I wonder if they open on the CMC. Probably not. Now, even though the SLR has that old school ignition, to actually start the car, you flip open the top of the gearshift like a jet fighter pilot deploying his Sidewinder missiles, and then press an illuminated button, which is absolutely awesome. The front wheels do swivel from side to side, and the steering wheel corresponds to it. So you can see that we have a 3-spoke steering wheel with the Mercedes-Benz logo in the middle. We have buttons on either side, and they are painted with symbols. The instrument panel is made up of recessed analog gauges, and if you look closely, you can see the speedo and the tach. And down there we have painted floor pedals, which are also separate pieces. Alright then. Seatbelts. Oh yeah, that's one thing I forgot to mention. Seatbelts are there, but the belt buckles are not painted. And here's a look at the bottom of the Mercedes-Benz SLR McLaren. You can see it's pretty flat, and Maisto has replicated the riveting pretty authentically, as well as those 3 NACA ducts down there. Apart from that, there's really not a whole lot to see here. Here's another look at the diffuser blades. You can see that there are 5 of them. So yeah, pretty cool. Alright guys, I hope you like this review of this awesome 118 Maisto Mercedes-Benz SLR McLaren. And as always, have a wonderful day, and I'll see you in the next episode. This is Imperial Diecast, signing out.